Task Force Member Corvington,
Here.
Task Force Member Collier, Task Force Member Jelling,
Here.
Task Force Member Bowman,
Yes, here.
Task Force Member Caldwell,
Here.
Task Force Member Hildreth, Task Force Member Alou,
Here.
Task Force Member LeMay, Task Force Member Marshall,
Present.
Task Force Member Volmer,
Hi, I'm here.
thank you, ma'am. Task Force Member Hopper, Task Force Member Becker,
Here.
Task Force Member Ward, Task Force Member Webster, Council Member Remy,
Here.
Council Member Dodwell,
Here.
and Council Member Flasher.
Here.
And my apologies to the co-chair. I should have said co-chair Caldwell. Mr. and co-chairs, you have a quorum.
Great. Maura, you want to take over here for the approval of minutes?
Yes. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the October 13th meeting that were sent out via email? Looks like Councilmember Remy. Second by Jelling. All right. So those minutes are all in favor, say aye.
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 It's like any nays? Minutes are approved.
Cool. So we want to thank everyone for being here again. Like I said, we really appreciate it. I know that when we originally talked about this task force, when it was first introduced, it was going to be a quarterly thing, and we're hoping to go to that after this meeting here. But we wanted to kind of all get on the same page. I think there was some confusion after the first meeting. So we just kind of want to talk about what our goals are as a task force. And we want you guys to obviously contribute to that. So we're going to do that a little bit later. But right now, the way that we've kind of see this task force going is to get out into the community in a sense that we kind of find out what some of the programming in our community is and kind of bring it into a central hub, more or less, to where people can access these programs and resources that are out there in the community. And so we're hoping that you guys, as active members in the community and people that are involved in lots of things, can kind of help us find some of these organizations and things that would help benefit community members when they need information or when they want to get more involved in activities and make it more of a central area for that. Now, we're not going to necessarily do that through the city. We've been advised that might not be the best avenue to go, but the city is going to help us kind of get this up and going. And so that's kind of the goal. Does anybody have any questions or comments related to that stuff? Great.
Okay, so I think that takes us to the next kind of idea of ours and the agenda topic, which is the small group discussion, which we're realizing we maybe have some technical issues here we're trying to work out. But the idea of that was, I think with a group this large, we want to make sure that everyone's voices and input is heard. And so potentially breaking out into, especially for tonight, kind of just random small groups and having maybe one person be in charge of leading the discussion in the small group, coming up with ideas, and then coming back together in a large group to kind of report on what was discussed. And again, looking for things like ideas about how to get in contact and get these resources pulled, what these resources are, what some of the barriers are, and and anything else that comes out of these small group discussions. Does anybody have any questions or comments, concerns about that?
I don't know how you would do small groups on this. I'm not sure how to do that.
That's where Kathy comes in.
Well, it sort of is where Kathy came in, but Kathy realized there's a glitch. So normally in the meeting format of Zoom, we can use breakout rooms. But unfortunately, we run these meetings in a webinar format, which means we are unable to do breakout rooms. What we can do is if we want to shuffle the agenda a little bit, and while we're on because once we go into breakout rooms, we can't really be broadcasting on YouTube anyway. So if we want to finish the agenda, like I can do the SharePoint demo, and then in the chat, I can put the link, and basically on the city's second Zoom account, sorry, we'll have to sign off on the webinar and reconvene in a meeting, and then we can do breakout sessions. I apologize. I didn't realize that this format limited that feature. So.
Didn't either.
Yeah, no worries. I mean,
Freaking
then
out.
will we be able to then reconvene and kind of talk about what those ideas were after that's all said and done?
So when we join the meeting, we'll be just like this.
Okay.
And then we'll break into the small breakout rooms, and then we'll come back just like this.
Okay.
But we won't.
Perfect.
We'll just have to switch Zoom logins once. I'm so sorry.
No big deal. Cool. So do you want to go ahead then and share SharePoint? I think it might actually be beneficial to have the SharePoint thing shared before we go into the small groups anyway, because then we can kind of look over some of the ideas that have already been presented, and then it will give everybody an idea of how to share the ideas that they have after today.
Sure. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Now, once I go into share screen, I don't have I can't see what I'm actually sharing. So I just want to make sure, are you all seeing the SharePoint site here?
Yes.
Okay. So if anyone has had trouble getting logged in, just let me know. It's a little bit confusing because you do have to create a Microsoft account, even though it's probably not a Microsoft email. It's whatever email that you gave me to put on the site. So if you're having trouble, just let me know. But yours will look just like mine when you come in here, because you'll all have the edit capabilities, which is over here on the right side of the screen. I've kept everything on the home page so far, and I've kept it pretty simple. I want you all to be comfortable with it. And then once you reach a comfort level, we can get all crazy and add a lot of things if that's the direction that you all want to go. But for now, it's just very simple. So I gave you a little bit of news that we had created the spreadsheet, but again, this is probably a little extraneous, and Kathy just using all the features just to show you that it's there. If I actually am going to broadcast any news to the committee, I'm going to send you an email. You don't have to check SharePoint to get information. I've put our meetings in, so it will be a nice way to come back if you're looking for the meeting schedule. The 2021 dates are tentative. City Council will review and approve that calendar. But in discussions with the Dr. Remy, whose kind of brainchild this is, and then with our co-chairs, it looks like we're probably going to meet quarterly beginning in 2021. So those dates are here, and you can see. And if you have small group meetings that you want to post on here, you can do that as well. And then there's a document section, and we have our spreadsheet. And I want to applaud you all because you're already busy at work getting those things added. So feel free also to add any columns and edit this however you would like. You can edit right in the spreadsheet once we click the edit button. So if you start typing, nothing works, you just have to hit the edit, and then you can type right in that spreadsheet. And multiple people can be working in it at the same time. So as long as you keep it in the SharePoint, don't download it and try and re-upload it. Just work in the SharePoint file. And you can type right there. Does anybody have any questions? It's really that simple, and that's all the information that we have out there.
I actually have a question. And this is something I think we need to discuss. How far out of the Wildwood radius do we want to look for organizations that can help the people of Wildwood? I mean, is it infinite, or is it more we just want to kind of keep the focus more or less within a, I don't know, let's say 5 mile radius? I'm just throwing a number out there. Does anybody have any thoughts or input on that? Dr. Remy?
I think you could do it two ways. I think the original intent was to understand what was going on within the city and within a very small radius of the city, like 2 to 5 miles. But then I think there's nothing wrong with, after that first pass is done, maybe many months from now, as people are collecting for that aspect, there's probably nothing wrong with having a general separate document for potential other areas that could be of interest for the community. But I think since the focus probably is in and around just Wildwood, it may be good to set those sort of limits like you just mentioned, like the 5 mile radius or something like that, like Ellisville and areas that would have mutual interest and things that we could share resources with.
Ms. Vollmer?
Yeah, I think that what I would say about that is we would have to look at the organizations themselves and see if they are using us as their service area. So I'm going to take Circle of Concern as an example, right? Their service area is Parkway, Rockwood, and Valley Park School District. There's not going to be another food pantry in Wildwood specifically because Circle of Concern covers us. So even though their headquarters are in Valley Park, we are their service area in Wildwood, if that makes sense. So I don't want to get too caught up with it has to be within the Wildwood city limits, because if they service us, then they are services for Wildwood, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, just to keep it within areas that more or less service the Wildwood area. That's a good call. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I think that's a good distinction I hadn't considered, so I appreciate that.
I have
Mr.
a
Bowman.
question.
Oh.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to say that as the list grows, I don't know if it would be advantageous to make separate sheets for certain types of organizations, because since I represent a church, and I know that if we got all of the churches of Wildwood and Ellisville, or whatever our parameters are, and that's going to be a lot, and then it might be easy to miss some of the groups like Circle of Concern. So I don't know if at some point thinking through a way to categorize, just so that at a glance we can kind of see the different types of entities. I know there is a column that asks for that, but maybe as it grows, there might be a way of being able to make a distinction there. Just an idea.
Yeah, that's great. We'd actually talked about maybe potentially forming some subcommittees within this big task force, just so that everyone's voice can be heard more regularly,
right,
and to kind of aim at different directions and not everyone trying to go over the big compass of the whole area and all the different organizations. So yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you.
Councilmember Dava.
You're muted.
The button.
Can't hear.
You're muted again. Sorry, Kitty.
I'm not touching anything. You can see my hands. Do we have a way within SharePoint to set up those subgroups as listed in the spreadsheet? And then once we move this into a website that people can get to, we can have specific categories. If you're interested in veterinary services, you can click on this link and then you can see a list of veterinary services. If you're looking for senior services, you can click on senior services, whatever category, primary categories, so that we don't have people having to scroll through a list of hundreds of different organizations. I'm just wondering how we do that in SharePoint, or if we have to set up a specific web tree to do that.
Well, we can organize the information however we want in SharePoint. It's really like just a server, and we can organize by different spreadsheets. I mean, we can use like a file cabinet where one folder has, faith-based organizations, and then we put whatever information we want in there. So I think that as we have these small group discussions, I think that'll be a great start to understanding what buckets we want different things in as we organize it. So SharePoint, we have a large capability and lots of organizational availability on it. But its intention is strictly for task force member use. It's not going to be a public searchable domain. You're on mute, Councilmember Dodwell, sorry.
I just want to make sure that we have some way of, once we gather all the information, to be able to easily publish it to the public. And I realize it probably shouldn't be in our SharePoint site, but if we can tie that into our city website, or are we not going to be providing a link on our city website for any of this information? How are we publishing this information for the community?
Someone above my pay grade and with a larger brain than I can probably answer that, but there are concerns about this is probably not going to be on the city website. The city does not have the freedom and flexibility to pick and choose who we include in the list. So if an organization that you all deem wholly inappropriate wants to be on the list, we would have to include them if it were on the city website. So I think the goal is to work with an entity outside of the city, and in that original diagram where we had this like center and all the planets, the city's a little more like Pluto and may not be a planet, but anyway, we will, we'll be a smaller player in the game, but we'll gather the information and hand it off to the appropriate entity, but I don't know that it's us.
Dr. Remy, I had your hand up next, and then Ms. Jelling, I had you after that.
Sure. So, Kathy, just out of curiosity, can you share, or do you want me to share the SharePoint? I have it open, but here, I don't know. Can you see my screen?
No,
You can't see my screen?
no, I just started a screen. Now I can.
Okay, so just for the moment, what I just did was I made some of these hidden, and then I wrapped the text to be easier. But for now, what I just did was I did a simple, here, I'll unhide this just to show folks that are wondering. So these say, so I sorted by city where they're located. And then what I did was I added 2 columns, meaning as we were mentioning, in Wildwood versus serves Wildwood. And that way then we could easily just customize that, which would then subsequently be able to rapidly be able to tell the answer to that question. For that was just mentioned, I thought it was a brilliant idea by Ms. Wilmer. So that might be one thing that could be helpful. In regards to the question that was just asked by Councilmember Dodwell, one consideration, Katie, we talked about was engaging someone, say as the WBA, or someone who might want to perhaps create like a booklet type thing for our community resources, but then also in the perhaps development of this task force, once everybody's identified and maybe there are just some initial sort of meet and greet type things, whether it's virtual and real time, is that some of the categories of those groups might want to actually say, hey, we've got 14 faith-based groups and we've got this our programming. Why don't we just create our own faith-based link or something on our web pages that are all combining everything together, and or same with community service groups. And so I think a lot of things can probably springboard off of that without have to be housed through the city per se. Just so that we're not, because we have limitations for other reasons, unfortunately, as you would imagine. But anyway, I just was playing with the SharePoint. I think it was a brilliant idea by Ms. Fulmer. I just was adding some things.
Ms. Jelling, you want to go ahead?
I guess my question was, so we can't even have a spot on the website that says community outreach, and if you need any resources, contact this anywhere, or go to this website if you have any, if you need anything. We can't do that either. I mean, you have it on there where community outreach. Now someone's going to go there and push that, and it's going to be nothing. I don't understand.
Dan, do you want me to answer that one? Well, I'm just going to hazard a guess, but let's just say that there were some organizations with, let's say, less than appropriate mission statements in the world. Well, you can just use the whole world. We can't discriminate against a nonprofit. So we would have to list everyone so that we don't discriminate against one, if that makes any sense.
But we have on the website already that we have a community outreach program. But so if a person goes to find out what is the community outreach program, all they're going to find out is our names. I mean, I'm trying to figure out how we able to link it to the city. It seems like, you know, if our purpose is to be able to give services to our community, but they have no way of finding out that we have services to offer you. I just don't see how we're going to be able to get the information, which is, I think, what Katie was saying also. Maybe I'm misunderstood.
So if anyone would contact us about the task force, we would discuss what your mission is, what you're working on, that kind of stuff. At the conclusion of the task force, which is yet to be determined, if the product that you all have completed is this wonderful clearinghouse of all of these resources and all of these other available options and organizations for residents, if they would call the city, we would say, let me put you in touch with this community group that we have that does that. And then that community group, which may be all of you that formed your own separate group, it just can't be a city entity. And the city attorney has very strong opinions on it, because there's certain things that we can and that we can't do. So we also struggle a little bit with, I don't want to get too far in the weeds on all this because I am definitely not an attorney, but we also struggle with, you know, we cannot use public funds for any private things. And we also can't make recommendations. So if someone has someone's house burned down and they need assistance, the city will help them through the building permit process. We will help them, but we can't make a recommendation on a contractor because then we're in the middle. So there's just a whole lot of legal things that we're kind of bordering and touching on here, but we can come up with all of these great ideas and all this information. The city just, at the end of the day, can't be the clearinghouse necessarily for it, if that makes sense.
You have a business directory. Why can't you have a service directory? We have a business directory in the city. And I think the thing we're missing is people now quit calling. They'd rather look things up on the internet. It's so much on their time and when they can do it, instead of, you know, calling the city and saying, you know, I need food. I don't have any food. Can you recommend someone to help me get through the month? They're more embarrassed, but if they could look it up on the internet, I feel like it would be used more.
And I think that that's appropriate and an absolutely accurate answer. It just doesn't necessarily need to be on the city's website, I guess is what I'm saying. Our business directory is licensed businesses that have met all of the city codes. Again, we can't discriminate and eliminate, so we may be in an area that's not where we want to be.
Dr. Remy, you want to go ahead?
So, Ms. Jelling, I think your point is well taken. One consideration could be, though, that a final work product from all of this could actually be a mere community organization, just simple and just dedicated to as a Wildwood Community Association, as general as that. But it can take all of the work that we're doing and basically put together a web page that could have and house all of this stuff, but it's just not connected directly as a city entity.
But they could put it on the website and say, please go to this to get this information or not. That's what I'm trying to find out.
Kathy, is that possible? If there was a community or association called the Wildwood Community Association, would that be something that the city could potentially have a resource link?
Potentially, but we'd have to, I mean,
Yeah.
The city council has a policy that they've issued on use of the website by outside entities. So you all have the ability and the control to say, this one's okay.
So you just threw it back to us that now Dan and I and Katie are responsible.
Mr. Vunich, did you want to add in?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Flasher. I have maybe a little different opinion than maybe our city attorney. I think while the task force is developing the list, I think we have a lot of latitude. I wouldn't be bound by the concern that somebody's going to bring something in because it's a working document, and working documents are not the final draft of the product. I think the issue becomes once we have a final draft and you've all agreed that this is what we want to go with, where does it get hosted? It may not be on the city website, but we've got to find a location to host it. So I'd keep your creative juices moving forward, fill out the SharePoint site, find all these organizations that can do good in the city of Wildwood, and the city of Wildwood can do good for them. And we'll keep it as a working document, which doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be published. And then once we finalize it, though, that's when the decision comes, where does it get hosted? Thank you.
Katie, you want to go ahead?
I would suggest that maybe a couple of us perhaps talk with the city attorney and look at what alternatives we have to answer the question regarding, can we put a link on the website, number one. Number two, what type of entity needs to be developed in order to create a website and have an ongoing maintenance process of said website, so that as organizations fall off the map, we can take them off the website. As new ones come on, we can put them on the website, but that's going to take a caretaker of the information if it's going to be of any value to our residents, so that we look at, it appears to me we've got what resources do we want to place on there, what processes do we want to put in place in order to provide those resources, and then what ongoing maintenance processes will we be using to maintain this site. And I think those are three very distinct different tasks that we have to look at. And I don't know if we look at them individually, if you want to set up a couple of subcommittees under this to dig further into some of those things. I'm just throwing out ideas here. So I just want to make sure that we're, as Joe said, we can certainly are in that developmental process, but I think while we're going forward on the developmental process, we need to look at our resources to be able to post and host this information and maintain it. Otherwise, we'll be spending a year with no way to publish and do anything. And I don't want to wait until we get to the end of that year and we've pulled all this information together and then have somebody say, oh, well, you can't do that. You can't post that here, and et cetera. I'm not trying to be a naysayer. I'm just trying to make sure that we understand how we are able to place this information someplace purposeful. Would the WBA be willing to host it? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. I like the idea too of maybe a group of people meeting with the attorney just to get some more clarification. Mr. Marshall?
Yeah, just a couple comments. Maybe as we try to go through what the need is, we should maybe keep in mind, and each of the different organizations have a lot of different areas where they try to help. So maybe we should identify who would be the recipient of this service. So for example, and I'll just kind of default back to the Lions Club, and then I'll give you another suggestion just based on experience. You need to kind of qualify. So we provide eyeglasses for any child in the Rockwood School District by coordinating it with 5 other Lions clubs. But the kids, they can apply for it, but the school nurses then do the eye test, and the school nurses then determine that they are on or cannot afford it. So Medicaid or whatever. And then they get referred to an eye doctor, and then the Lions Club pays the difference for those eyeglasses. But I just think the city doesn't want to be in a position of coordinating anything more than if you had a child who needed eyeglasses, you click here, maybe you send it over to the Wildwood Area Lions Club, and then you click there and it says, you go to the school district nurse, the school nurse. I mean, some way that you don't just open it up, because believe me, we have people calling who can certainly afford their eyeglasses, but they believe it would be great if somebody could pay for those glasses for them. So I think as you look at some of the different organizations that do multiple things for different age groups, maybe we want to look at age groups, or whether it's medical related, or whether it's needing food, or whether it's just wanting to get involved. We have I think they're still doing the ski assistance for blind folks at Hidden Valley. Another great organization, but they're just not going to have people go from the City of Wildwood site to Hidden Valley to do that. So somehow to narrow down the groups, maybe if we get the larger groups that do a lot of things and say, what would be your top 2 or your top 3 items? And then get us to try to look at who would be the recipient of that. I mean, we'll do classes for older people, but there are so many ways you have limited funds. So I would imagine each of the different organizations kind of have guidelines that they work from in order to narrow that down, and not try to be everything to everybody, but try to figure out if we could do 1 or 2 things, then where are we missing, and what do you do? So based on Dr. Remy, the Lions Club went together and we provided 10 iPads for the nursing homes. Well, we could do 1 in Wildwood, and we did 1 in Ellisville because they had a need. So, part of that, I think, is just trying to figure out, you don't want to lock yourself down, but have that kind of flexibility to figure out how to do it. But I think maybe who the recipient is, and not just say, it could be that anybody who needs clothing or anybody who needs food, but if you narrow it down to either people with special needs that are under certain medical diagnosis, some way to be able to channel it to someone else who can help sort that or provide those services might be a suggestion. So just a thought.
Thank you. That's good consideration.
With that thought in mind, with Ed's thought, I wondered if we could have spokespersons from these organizations come and really give us some insight. I'm sorry to be late, so maybe this has already been suggested, but to give us some, tell us about their organization, because I think that would be very valuable for me, because I don't know all the possible, organizations. I know the ones I did, but I would be willing to contact those people and ask them if they could send, come to a Zoom meeting, whatever, and give us some more information about their organization.
I think I saw Dr. Remy's hand up, and then go from there.
I think it's a great idea, Ms. Ward. One consideration was that once we'd identified all these groups, then we would email or contact them and maybe just send out like a 1-pager where they could fill out that information. And then we could have an interactive, perhaps, time where we could have exactly like you said. I think that's a brilliant idea.
Ms. Jelling, you want to go ahead?
So I guess I would ask, so won't we be vetting these, going through these different organizations to see if we want them provide services to us or not? Will we be deciding as a group, what organizations we want to have in our outreach program or not? I just wondered that.
Well, my thought was that we could find out what kind of services they provide, and then, make it available to our residents. I mean, I don't know that we would stop any of them unless we felt that they were totally inappropriate. or didn't.
That's what I'm
have
saying.
anything
That's what they're
that-
worried about putting on the website if it's inappropriate, but I don't think we have that on our outreach if it was inappropriate, but I don't know if the problem with the discrimination thing is.
Well, I meant inappropriate in terms of what our residents might be looking for.
Yes,
Not appropriate, bad inappropriate, just not. what-
I understand that, but that was one of the things they were talking about, that they, on the website, that they can't discriminate against any group, right? So, but I didn't know if we were gonna screen the organizations as a group to let, will we be doing any of that? I don't know.
Ms. Dybel, I had you next.
Well, just to piggyback on what they just said, I think we're going to have to put our list together first and identify the various groups that we can think of. And then from that, we can determine how and what. I want to make sure if we have a community group come in and tell us about themselves, more than anything, I want them to tell us what benefit they would find in having a resource like this that was supported by the city of Wildwood in some way and the citizens of Wildwood on this committee to be placed on some type of external website from the city. And would that be of benefit to them too, not just tell them about what they do, but also what the benefit would be to them to have us work with them to better publish and make citizenry in Wildwood know about their services. So I'm not sure how we're all trying to figure out which comes first, the chicken or the egg here.
Mr. Larson?
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right. We just need to get the list out there and start working through it. I think until we do that, it's just conjecture. Sorry. The other thing is that, as you mentioned, how we have these organizations. Just an example, we talked about Circle of Concern, and they don't just provide food pantry or food and assistance. They do other things as well. So if they had as a resource this information, then they could be more effective in pointing them back to the larger ecosystem of help that's provided, right? So working with those kinds of organizations to further empower them to show, basically provide a resource for other kinds of help that maybe they can't provide, but that they do kinds of counseling as an example, and other organizations probably do similar things. So, it will help feed the ecosystem to engage them in that way.
And I think that was the goal all along from Mr. Remy, was let's get these organizations working together more so that we can work together as a community and not such separate entities working for their own good, but working for the betterment of everybody. And I think you also nailed it on the head here. Right now, we just need to focus our attention on kind of getting those organizations identified, getting them on paper. And then once we kind of see a list of what those organizations are, we can break off into what the next step is as far as what we're going to do with that list and kind of focus our attention on what the different subcommittees could be and things like that. Does anybody have anything else?
I played again with your spreadsheet, guys, just as a preliminary, and I just created some categories at the bottom, and then on the master spreadsheet in the interim until things are decided. But this might make it a little easier. And then when you look in K, those tabs you can just put in. Like I changed St. Alban Road a faith-based service nonprofit, like a lot of faith-based groups. And then once we get the master sheet, we can actually just sort it. These will pop in, and then we just can cut and paste those into the individual categories, and then we'd have them be able to come right out. I hope that was okay. I didn't mean to jump the gun on the SharePoint, but I'm a data guy, so this is what I like to do.
I think that makes it easier, Ken.
I agree. Thank you.
So if we don't have any more comments here, does anybody have anything else in general, like other matters for consideration that they would like to bring to the table here? Otherwise, we should start probably getting ready to go to these smaller groups and kind of narrow down some of the stuff we've talked about.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I do feel like I'm talking too much. One of the things I thought, am I on? I'm not muted, right? One of the things I thought, where is the diversity part of that I thought that was one of the things that we were going on with this outreach too. And I don't see the diversity. Am I missing something?
It's definitely something that we might get into. We're obviously hoping that kind of happens as we identify the organizations that are available to our community, and then we can see how we can reach different diversities, whatever that be, whether it be faith or whatever, and how we can use what we've compiled to reach different people. If that helps make any sense at all with that.
I think in my understanding of that as well is looking at, excuse me, what are some of the barriers to accessing services as well. And I think diversity is certainly a part of that.
I did look for specific organizations in our area that did focus on the diversity issue, especially racial diversity and LGBTQ, and there weren't any in the area. So I'm kind of hoping that we can consider expanding our radius for those types of things to include all of that.
I would agree with that. I think it's much needed in the community as well.
I concur as well that we need to make sure, but if we can get what we have here locally first and then look at where we're missing things, then we can pull together outside resources that may be 20 miles away or 30 miles away in different parts of the county or in another county contiguous with us that would be closer for residents to be able to go to. So I'm glad you did that initial investigation, Michelle.
But just for a point of clarification for the purpose of this task force and what the resolution that supported it, the idea was that that we would identify community organizations and in the community existing, and in that identification and understanding programming, help discuss with them to see what barriers might exist for participation or where there may be gaps. And the gap that we just mentioned would be just congruent with once we establish relationships with the ongoing current organizations, we may be able to identify uniform gaps that could be needing external assistance to try to close those gaps. But that by itself was not the focus of this task force. I think that there was some confusion with that part.
All right. Does anybody else have anything else they want to add before we do this break off and come back thing?
So just as a point of clarification, we will not be coming back to this Zoom call. So I want to make that clear because we do have an attendee that's in here, and I'll have to turn off the YouTube connection as well because it just isn't a format that'll work with the breakout room. So I tried to make sure that was clear.
So before we break off this, then, yeah, Maura, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Before we do the break off, are there public participation? Should we do that before we break out then?
Kathy, can't we just invite the attendee who is Rebecca Boomer-Schlegel to just be part of one of the subgroups for now?
Yeah, I just promoted her into a panelist so the conversation's a little bit easier.
There you go. seem to go along with the idea of community outreach.
Cool.
How do we want to break up in group?
I think we were hoping to kind of keep it randomized so that it's kind of more of an organic, you talk to the people that you end up with randomly. What we do want to focus on is maybe identifying what you guys might think some of these subcommittees could look like, what they would be based around, and then obviously having a conversation about different organizations and things like that that you think would be beneficial, I think is kind of the focus. And then hopefully everyone, each group, however you get randomized, can pick a spokesperson that when we get back together can kind of more or less report on behalf of your group some of the ideas that you came up with. Cool. So can we make it like, was it 5:48 now? Can we get back at 6 o'clock maybe and finish it out here? That sound like a plan?
Yeah, I put the link in the chat, so you'll need to grab it from there. I won't shut this one down. So if you just copy that link, you'll probably have to leave this meeting and then rejoin a new one. I'm so sorry.
So then at 6 o'clock, we would just come back to this link to reconvene. Is that correct?
The link that's in the chat, yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
Kathy, I'm not seeing it in the chat.
Okay, I'll post it again, but then the other thing is, let me also send you all a quick email.
Okay, I see it now.
I'll just send it.
Okay, so we need to go into that Zoom at 6, or we should go into that other Zoom now, and then Kathy will randomize us, and then we'll come back together, like that after 10 minutes of discussion.
Correct. Yep. Wait, second option there.
All right, so now we all go to the other Zoom. Okay.
So see you guys all around 6 o'clock here back in this one. Some of you I'll see in just a second.